It's official. Russ is the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to talk about all the fantasy impacts today. Let's get into it.
Let's go.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. We're your hosts, Calvin Timms and Dale Terry. And we got so much free agency news to talk about, but we're going to start this one off with just the implications of Russell Wilson to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's pretty funny. He left the Broncos holding a big bag of money for him and took a vet minimum deal with the Steelers. And we're going to talk about all the dynasty implications of this signing here today. Before we do that, I'm your host, Calvin Timms, my co-host, Dale Terry. You can find us over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, at Dynasty_Dale, and the podcast at FF After Dark. We're going to be putting out a lot of videos this week. We're going to be doing a little bit more individual on a couple of these, but we'll have a full recap of all the free agency dropping on Friday of free agency week. You know, if you're watching this a little bit later, go back and check out our full recap. We're going to be talking about all the players there, but Russell Wilson is a Steeler. How are we feeling about that, Dale? And
Hey,
also, how you doing?
yeah. Hey, I'm doing good. I am feeling dangerous today, haha. But yeah,
Your
no, I'm
punts are
doing really
unlimited.
well. I am. I'm unlimited. Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I think these couple signings we're going to talk about today are, interesting, and they do have a lot of impact, in the NFL landscape, and today, like especially today, we are recording this on Monday night. There was a big domino that fell in Kirk Cousins here.
Yeah, that's the next video, Dale. That's the next video. We don't
That's
spoil
true.
it. But
That's true. Spoiler right there. My bad.
if you guys
my
are
bad.
interested in hearing our victory lap, Kyle Pitts, and how much he's going to the moon, he's Pitts coin, baby, straight to the moon. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. So come back and check out that video as well. But today we're going to be talking about Russ and the Steelers. And, a lot of people are really down on Russell Wilson, it feels like, after the last couple of years. For fantasy, I just don't understand it. Like, I swear, half of fantasy dynasty Twitter doesn't like people who score points. It's really odd. They
Agreed.
just want to be right about their takes at the cost of fantasy points, which is really dumb, guys. Like, it's extremely stupid. But last year, Russell Wilson, he finished the year as a quarterback 14 with only 15 games because he got benched for 2 of them. And he only played a little bit of the third one where he got benched in week 9 against Tennessee, looking more and more like it was a benching rather than an injury at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But, finished as quarterback 14. Is Russ cooked or what? What are your thoughts on Russ last year?
I think Russ was fine last year. I thought he played a lot better than he did in the first year with Hackett as his head coach. And I agree. I don't get why people are so down on Russell Wilson. I know he's a character and he's very polarizing. I get that,
Right.
but I think his play should really be what people are looking at, and it wasn't bad last year. I just think
It
I think
was
the
not
Broncos
good. I'll say
it wasn't
that.
good, but it wasn't bad. I mean, it was decent. It
Go ahead.
like it wasn't horrible. Yeah. It just wasn't horrible. Like, I mean, I don't get why people think it was as bad as it was. Like, I mean, I would much rather have Russell Wilson than what of what he did last year than what Kenny Pickett did last year. Hands down.
For sure. Going over to the Pittsburgh side, but going back to Denver and Russell Wilson and his time there. Obviously year 1 had Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett has clearly been an issue as terms of an offensive coordinator, not worked out very well for him there. Now they bring in Sean Payton, and obviously Sean Payton is a good coach. But it sounds like all the reports are, after things kind of fell apart, is he wanted Russ to work to his system. He did not want to change his system for Russell Wilson. And, say what you will about that, but you could see that on the field that there were a lot of times where the play calling, you're just like, what are you doing, man? Like, do you know who you have at quarterback? Like, this is just not, it didn't look pretty on the field. It didn't feel good to watch. They had no run game whatsoever. Jerry Jeudy, we'll find out if he's going to be any good over in Cleveland now. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was the Denver situation. Who knows? But obviously, Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy were not the greatest of weapons. And now people are going to say, well, that was Russ, not the weapons. But it's also possible. It could have been both, right? It could have been both.
Yeah.
No run game, mediocre play calling in a lot of critical situations. I remember one drive, and it was a Thursday night football game. If I remember right. And the play calls that Sean Payton called on it was like they got a good chunk of yards on first down. I think it was like 2nd and 2. And then the next 3 play calls, because they went for it on 4th down, were horrendous. You're like, what is this? Like, it's obviously easy to move the ball on early downs, but you're just like, whatever reason, their brains just fried on 3rd down situations. So I don't know if it's completely Russ. I don't know if it was Sean Payton. It's probably more Russ. Well, if we're being honest,
I think
seems like
I personally think it's both. I think I go back to, like it's with. I mean, if you kind of think about it, that like Sean Payton is this, I guess you could say a legendary coach,
right?
And all this, and I mean, he's definitely not a Bill Belichick, but like if you kind of view it like how like Brady had Belichick had Brady and Peyton had Breeze, like how much of it was the quarterback and what they were able to do, and I think if you're a coordinator, like you're kind of supposed to fit your players to a scheme.
Right. I agree. That's what the good guys do anyway,
Yes.
It makes me wonder, and there's all the rumors that Sean Payton, did he actually want Russell Wilson to be his quarterback?
Right.
He said all the right things last year, but the way he came out and trashed the way that the team played in 2022, it does make me wonder a little bit. So that said, Russ has moved on to a new era of his career, left the Broncos holding $38 million of his contract this year. The funny thing is, it doesn't matter. He was getting paid either way, right? And the dead cap was always going to be there for Denver. So they always had $85 million. But if he would have signed a bigger contract with the Steelers, the Waltons themselves would have had to pay a little bit less, and the Hines or Field, the owners for the Steelers would have had to pay a little bit more. Right. So, the Rooney's, right. So it is funny that he left the bag with the Waltons as a.
I honestly don't blame him. So like, why should you burden your new team for what your old team did?
For sure. It was definitely a competitive advantage thing. So, all right. In Pittsburgh, we have to start with the offensive line. I do think that the offensive line for the Steelers played much better last year than a lot of people expected. They lost a couple of guys in free agency. We're going to see if they can really keep that offensive line together. If they can just make sure that they're not bottom 10, I think that this offense is going to be just fine. They bring in Arthur Smith at OC, and, meme all you want. Arthur Smith, I have my problems with the man. But his offenses were not bad. Like his player usage was annoying as it was terrible, but the plays were not bad. They were constantly able to move the ball. Desmond Ridder just made a lot of mistakes after mistake, like stupid boneheaded turn over the ball and interceptions, things like that. But they were able to move the ball. You come over here, you've got Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren. I think Jaylen Warren's going to be a sleeper, like sneaky, valuable fantasy asset because Najee.
I don't think he's a sleeper anymore.
That is true. I don't know. With
some people, like he kind of broke out towards the end of last year, but I think it's going to be. I know that Tomlin has been traditionally like a one-back system, but I think with what Arthur Smith has done in his running schemes. Yeah, I think it suits a two-back system very well.
I agree 100%. And, obviously Jaylen Warren's more of the pass-catching, explosive space guy. Najee Harris remains one of the most confusing players of all time because the last 3 weeks, the dude just went nuclear. The entire season, it was like mediocre yard per carry. The last 3 weeks, 4.11, 4.52, 4.31, over 100 yards the last 2 weeks, 4 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks combined. Like the dude just turned into a different monster at the end of the year. And you're like, where was this the whole year, man? Like, what are we doing here? So it'll be interesting to see how they use Najee Harris. I do think Najee can be good for fantasy, but, I don't know if he's going to be as good as people are expecting, if he's going to be able to return to old Najee form. But that's a nice 1-2 combo at running back for sure, especially with Russ. I don't think much changes in my opinion.
Agreed.
Receiver wise, now this is where Kenny Pickett was terrible, guys. And, they had Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph, and it wasn't really much better. You look at Kenny Pickett's stats, and it always boggled my mind how people just extrapolate things like, oh, if he takes if he gets 25% better this year, then he's going to be just fine. Well, he didn't get 25% better, and I don't know what you saw on the field in his rookie season that said he was going to get 25% better, because he was just as bad this year on one less game. So 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and only 2,000 yards total in 12 games. It was great. 42 rushing attempts for 54 yards on the ground and 1 rushing touchdown. Kenny Pickett was horrible. He was absolutely horrible. Russell Wilson will at least be decent. And this is where guys like George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, if he's with the team, we'll find out. I would not be shocked if they trade him and do what the Steelers always do and draft a second-round wide receiver who becomes an all-pro. But Pat Freiermuth as well, if he can stay healthy. The biggest guy that I think is a sneaky kind of potential upside guy would be Darnell Washington in this offense. We saw the way Arthur Smith used Jonnu Smith down in Atlanta. And
he does like tight end twos a lot.
He loves them, dude. He loves them. It's crazy. And Darnell Washington was if you remember the combine just last year, he was a superstar in terms of athleticism. Like, he was a freak of nature in that aspect. So if Pat Freiermuth can't stay healthy, man, it's entirely possible we could see a lot more of Washington stepping in there and getting a little bit more usage. So what are your thoughts on these receivers, and what do you expect from Russ coming over here this year?
I will say that, last year in Denver, Russ was able to support Cortland Sutton, but a lot of that was, touchdowns, primarily. I just, again, I don't know if it was just scheme or what they were doing, but, I'm going back to his days in Seattle where he had, Tyler Lockett, he had Metcalf as well.
Right.
And he was able to support those guys for, top 24 seasons pretty easily, I feel. So I think it's going to be interesting which way Arthur Smith kind of leans. And, I think what we've seen historically with him in Tennessee and with him down in Atlanta, it's going to be a little bit more run heavy, which isn't a horrible thing for Russ because he's able to get out he's able to get out in the pocket a little bit.
Yep.
So, I do agree with you that, Darnell Washington is definitely a sneaky guy. I definitely think he could, he could have some sneaky touchdowns around the goal line. Like I did see some tweets, people making fun of the fact that they're going to hand off the Darnell Washington at the 1 yard line, over and over.
Right.
So, I can see that, and I do think if Pat Freiermuth stays healthy, which I know he's had, the concussion problems, he's had other lower body injuries as well. I think if he stays healthy, I think him and Washington can both be pretty relevant in the tight end scheme.
Right.
As for receiver, I think it's only going to be one guy. I think if Deontay Johnson, I feel Deontay Johnson is the one in that wide receiver room. Even though George Pickens would like to fight me on that, I'm sure.
So here's the thing.
Personally, I'm not a big Pickens guy. He's flashy. He's flashy. And that's fine. But that's not. I don't feel that's very, very predictable, and we want predictable things in fantasy football.
Sure. Now, here's the thing. So the reason why I disagree with you on George Pickens is, you look at the player comps here. DK Metcalf, 6'4", 235. Cortland Sutton, 6'4", 216. Now, George Pickens isn't quite that thick, right? He's 6'3", 200 pounds. He's a little bit slimmer than the other guys. But when it comes to touchdowns, Russ loves the big guys. And What do we know about Kenny Pickett?
I would disagree with that a little bit because like he did like,
You
Tyler
like Lockett. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong. But Jerry Jeudy was more of the Lockett type of receiver, right? And Deontay
That's true.
When you look at the way that these guys play, DK Metcalf, Courtland Sutton, George Pickens, they all play similar types, right? They're more of a contested catch kind of guy. They're bigger bodies. Not saying that any of them can't get open or anything like that, but they are just more flashy, big catch type of guys. Deontay Johnson, Jerry Jeudy, Tyler Lockett, they're all similar play sets, right? Where they're more of the shifty, I'm going to get open, I'm going to cook this guy type of guy. Now, it didn't work with Jerry Jeudy and Russ for the most part in Denver, but it did work really well with Lockett and Russ in Seattle. So I think Deontay Johnson could be the more reliable guy, but Pickens could have more touchdowns. And, that kind of tracks with what they've been able to do. Last year, Pickens had 1,140 yards and 5 touchdowns. Big yard per catch numbers, 18.1, but I do think that you're going to see a little bit more of a target distribution going his way, going into year 3. He's kind of proven himself a little bit on the field in terms of him in critical situations. You can rely on him a little bit more. And yeah, again, you just go to the type of players that these guys are. I could see, looking at Courtland Sutton, last year he had 90 targets for 60 catches. Not great at all, right? But he had 10 touchdowns. Last year with Russ, 75 catches for DK Metcalf, 12 touchdowns. So I could see George Pickens being around that 10 touchdown mark. Maybe it's like 70 catches, which for him is an upgrade over what he was last year, which was wide receiver number 30. So, potentially sneaky buy on George Pickens coming up. I feel like a lot of these players are sneaky, air quote, because nobody's excited about this move other than us.
No, yeah. And I agree with that. I think for Russ's career, this is the perfect spot. I know there's been a lot of people on Twitter joking that like Russell Wilson is going to ruin Mike Tomlin's winning seasons streak, but
probably not.
I think, I don't think so. I think they're going to be. I mean, I don't think they're going to be like. I don't think they're going to win the division by any means, but I think they're going to be very competitive because of the defense and because of some of the weapons they have. Like, I mean, honestly, Russell just needs to be kind of like what he was last year. And if he's anything like that, they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right. Any last thoughts on Russ over to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Nope.
All right. From a fantasy perspective, what would you be willing to give up for Russ in a Superflex league? First, second?
I would say a second. I think it's fair.
I'd be willing to give up a late first. You're talking.
I would say a mid-early second.
Mid-early second for you.
Yeah.
Late first, you're talking about guys like in a super flex, assuming that JJ McCarthy goes top 8. Odunze's up there, Bowers is up there. Probably you've got Brian Thomas Jr., you've got Troy Franklin, you've got David Worthy, some of these other guys. I'm willing to, if you need a quarterback's so valuable, man. I would be willing to take Russ over those guys. So, back end of the first, but part of that also goes into the fact that for me, from like 110 to 2.4, there's no difference at all. So it's all one giant tier anyway. But
that's true.
If you can get Russ for any of those picks, that's what I would kind of recommend. If you have Russ, sell him if you have to. But again, I'd wait until the season starts.
I mean, I would just keep him, and you're kind of wait and see mode at this point. I don't think this really moves the needle too much, and you don't really need to panic or freak out or anything like that.
For sure. So, all right. Any last thoughts?
Nope.
Again, if you guys can, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We want to get out a lot more of these videos this upcoming week, and I think the next one, Dale already spoiled it. If you didn't catch it at the top, we're going to be doing Kirk Cousins to Atlanta. Pitt's going to the moon, baby. Let's go. So until the next episode, make sure you guys subscribe, follow us on Twitter, and we appreciate you guys checking us out. Until next time, have a good night.
And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be?